going to go ahead and hit record now. And Melissa, thanks so much for joining us, and over to you.
All right, great. Thanks, Jessie. And thanks everyone for coming this morning. I appreciate your time already. Jessie, I have just a quick poll so we can find out how people, if people are teaching like pragmatics explicitly or not. So how often you do it.
So you should be able to view that poll on your screen now, and please go ahead and vote. Looks like we have some responses. I'll give everyone a little bit longer to get your answers in.
Great. All right, so from the looks of it, it looks like somebody else should be teaching this workshop. 4 people. 80% of you teach in every class. I think I will definitely be able to learn something from you today, I believe, which is great. All right. Am I going to click showing the results? All right. So out of 5 of you, 4 do it every class, which is great. And then how do I close that off my screen, Jessie? Oh wait, never mind. I see. Okay. All right. So good question, Maria. So from what I understand, when we talk about pragmatic speaking, it's practical speaking. Right. And so as all different things that you might teach, just so students, our learners, can sound more native-like in their speaking. So that's what I believe. So it's great to see that a lot of people already do this. So I have come to the right place to share my lessons and then to get some feedback from you.
Ms. Hauke, can you give Hauke, could you please give me some examples of pragmatic lessons in speech? I do put my students in breakout rooms where they discuss a question or a topic, but I don't know if that is pragmatics. Is pragmatics related to like me teaching them how to order food at a restaurant like that? Because that I don't do. We speak every day in class. I teach at Northern Virginia Community College, ESL, on topics, questions. I've given my students, and I model them, let's say if I don't understand what they've said, could you please repeat? Or I'm sorry, I didn't hear you, or do you mean this? And I've suggested that they say that to one another. So how to behave in a discussion group, but in other situations, I have not taught my students, let's say, how to order coffee at a Starbucks, or how to, there's just so many situations in life, and that I have not done, maybe because the textbook that I used does not lend, does not give me the opportunity to do so.
And that could be right. So I'm going to give 2 examples. My 2 lessons today that I'm sharing is one on just like conventional expressions, and the other one is like expressions of gratitude. But there's also, and as I start sharing my slides, I'll kind of address your questions and touch on that base just briefly. But yes, yeah, and I think that. So as I learned about this, well, I won't get ahead of myself, but good question. And then as I go along, I'll share that information. Okay. All right. We're getting more people, it looks like. Great, welcome. We're just getting started. We just did a little poll on to find out who teaches pragmatics specifically in class, and what are pragmatics, and that's, from what I understand, it's like that more practical way of using the language. So so today, let me go ahead and share I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me share my screen and share my slides, and then I can work from there. So we've already had a great question. All questions are great, of course. All right. So as we know, this workshop is being recorded. So my goals for today are to discuss the importance of pragmatic speech, getting you to share how you incorporate it into your lessons. I'm going to go over 2 lessons that I've taught, and then get some feedback on you on ways that I can improve my lessons, specifically with the speaking component. And then do we need to think about reading as well? As we'll see that my lessons don't really incorporate reading. So my first thinking is, why do we want to teach pragmatics in class? And I think one thing that it does is it improves this listening comprehension. So our students are adults. They're not just living in a classroom all day, like let's say high school teenagers or something like that. So they're out there at work, they're going to restaurants, maybe they're meeting with their child's teacher, and they're hearing a lot of speaking that we as native speakers use without even thinking about it. And so if they don't understand what that person is saying, their comprehension is going to break down. So if they know these phrases or terminology that we use, it will help them understand what's the situation they're in. Also, it helps them sound more like a native speaker. And I think we all know, whether we're language learners ourselves or actually, like me, I'm always trying to learn French. So I want to sound like natively. Or if you're someone who's come here and you're trying to sound like the person who speaks English, you're always trying to sound like you fit in, right, into that situation. So if you have these phrases that you can use, it makes you sound more like a native speaker. I know I have a student in my class now who, before he speaks, he'll always go like, well, and he kind of pauses and thinks, sort of like what native speakers do. So I always commend him on that, because he's doing that thing that we do without even noticing it. And also, when I did these 2 lessons, I noticed that my students were really interested and motivated for learning this information, because they really see that it applies in their lives, and also how I think they hear these phrases from time to time and don't really maybe understand them. So they're more motivated to learn these particular concepts. So back to, I think it was Maria's question. What are some topics? So like I said, today I'm going to go over expressions of gratitude and conversational or conventional expressions, but also how you take turns when you're speaking, how to apologize, how to answer, when you're talking on the phone. Right? These are some of the lessons that you might incorporate. Now, I will tell you that I didn't just like dream these up myself. After last year's TESOL convention, I was looking at books because we got like a discount, and I saw these 2 books, and I thought, wow, I should do this, because I don't do this in my class. And so I bought them, and I've taught 2 lessons out of them. And then I think for me, I felt like I don't think I'm still quite getting what I need to be doing. So I've sort of stopped and contemplating. But these 2 books, they're really good. Not that I'm selling 2 books, because I have nothing to do with them. But I will say, These are two really good books that I now possess, and they've got great lessons in them. All right, so what I would like to hear at this point maybe is if anybody would like to share some of these ways that you're incorporating pragmatic speech into your classrooms. Anybody? Because 4 of you said you do it every day. Don't be shy. William, were you one of those people who said that you incorporate them every day?
Well, at the beginning, I didn't quite understand what you meant by pragmatic lesson, but now I realize that we can incorporate it in our lessons every day, especially if we are focusing on speaking, not just writing, reading, and so on. And I tackle that from the angle of I've learned how to teach functional English. That is how you use language and in what context. And in that case, if you wanted to teach students to speak naturally, let's say not artificially, just like in a textbook, of course, in a conversation, you teach them how to switch from one thing to the other. If there's hesitation, then you put the natural hesitation. And if you wanted to disagree, you insert some terms for disagreement. Yeah, but if you are hesitating, if you have some doubt, say, could you say it again, and so on. And just those elements. I don't know whether this is the kind of thing you're talking about here.
Yes.
Because if it were just like in the textbook, it would be like a machine. But naturally, whether it's in English or any other language, we have all those elements that go into a conversation when we are in a speech act. Mm-hmm. So how do we put them in when it is English, since they may have them in their native languages, but not know them in English?
So you're saying that you just sort of teach them naturally as they arise during class time, perhaps? Yeah.
Or, for example, if I took a particular context where you were seeing your doctor, and your doctor asked you, how can I help you today? What's wrong today? And what sort of things are you going to say? Even though that is a simulation. In the classroom, it's a simulation, but in a real context, what would you be saying to your doctor? What sort of questions would the doctor ask? Of course, you as a patient, you don't ask the doctor's questions, but if the doctor asks you a question, what do you say?
Mm-hmm. Very practical, right? Things that they need, right?
Yeah.
Of course. Great. Thanks, William. Someone else want to share now that William has broken the ice for us? Anyone else? Everyone else is quiet. All right. Well, thanks, William, for sharing your strategies.
I guess modeling, what I do is that I model in class. If I don't, and I don't want to repeat myself, but when I don't quite understand my students remote through Zoom, I will ask clarification questions. And which was really nice was at the last day of class, a student was asking me a question and I did not understand. What was hindering part of our communication was the fact that in Zoom, the students can have their cameras turned off. And so I realize how important it is to be able to see one another's faces when we're talking, because a lot is communicated through our facial expressions, our eyes, and we use gestures as well to help us get our point across. And I didn't have that. So it was kind of like talking to someone on the phone. And he did have some pronunciation. He has some serious pronunciation problems. And so I just was not understanding him, and I was not getting it. And then he said he did something that he clarified, and he goes, no, no, no. Just as you have asked us to answer this question, I am asking you to answer the same question. And then I was like, oh my gosh, thank you. Thank you so much for clarifying that. Now I know what I want. Now I know what you want me to do. So I guess he did that because throughout the semester I had been modeling that.
Mhm. And really, that's a great like practical skill that he now has, right? Because if he gets into another situation and somebody seems confused, he knows how to solve that situation, right? To just,
Right.
which is really good.
Yes.
And I think that's what we need to help our learners be able to do, because they're going to be in those situations a lot, I think.
Mhm.
As someone who's traveled to other countries, like you get in those situations and you're like, I'm not really sure what that person just asked me. Right? And teaching them not to always say yes. Right. Right. Very good. Thanks, Maria.
Mhm.
All right. Well, so as I said, I've actually just taught 2 lessons out of these books, and then I sort of I don't know if I got discouraged, but I wasn't really sure if I was on the right track or not. So I kind of left it behind, but it's still on my mind as something I think is really important. So the first one I did was conventional expressions, and on this is the list that was in the book. There were 60 of them, and I was like, well, that's a lot of expressions. But as I looked at it closer, I saw that the authors had included the conventional expression and then like this modified expression. As you can see, like instead of saying on down the list, it says like instead of watch out, like watch up, or no problem, no problems. And I didn't want to teach this modified expression for fear that I would confuse my students. Maybe if we were in a face-to-face situation, it would be easier, but definitely virtually, I felt like this will just make things more confusing. So I only taught them the conventional, or only went over conventional expressions. And I like this chart because it showed like what the pragmatic function was, and then what the expression is that we use. So from that, I didn't use all, there were 18 terms. I didn't use all 18. I picked out, there were 25. I only used 18. I chose the ones that I thought maybe were most applicable, that we use more, that they might come across more often. And I sort of felt like 25 might be too many for my students. I didn't know. So these are the ones that I focused on. And of course, noticing, the I gotta, which we say, which is grammatically incorrect, but we say that all the time. And I often, when, you're talking to your students, they question this, or they begin to think it's a real word when of course we know it's not, right? Like have to, gotta, these kind of things that we use as we speak. So how I went about teaching this particular lesson was, in the book, it said you wanted to check the students' awareness of those terms. So because it was, I was doing it virtually, I thought, well, I'm just going to record myself on Flipgrid and let them listen to those terms. Because when you're doing something virtually, I never know how well they can hear me over Zoom, or we use in Fairfax County Blackboard Collaborate Ultra. Excuse me. And I don't know how good their internet connection is, and I want to make sure I got a good measure of what they knew. And so they were asked to listen to the phrase and then rated on either I often hear this, I sometimes hear it, or I never hear it. So that was how you find that out. And for the most part, most of the terms, they were able, I would share them with you, but Fairfax, like whatever I do on Fairfax County, I cannot share it out somewhere else. So it would be very hard to share the poll information. But most did not say that they had never heard any of these phrases. It was sometimes and often hearing the phrase. So that was a good sign, I thought. Then I took all those expressions and I put them into, and I'm loving these, the Pear Deck with the slides. If you haven't used that, I'm guessing everybody has by now. But if you haven't, I would definitely recommend those. And so I just went through. And gave them the phrase and explained when they use it. One thing that I've found over the last couple of years is that I have students who don't know how to use nice to meet you as opposed to nice to see you. I had students who would at the end of every class say to me, nice to meet you. So I finally had to I was trying to be nice about it, but I was like, this doesn't work. So I just, sent them a private message and said, it's only when you meet me the first time do you say nice to meet you. After that, we say something else. So I thought that was interesting. Mm-hmm. Sure thing. Right. No problem. Although they probably use that a lot, but maybe not sure thing. Would you mind? Would you mind? Giving me a soda at the soda machine. Would you mind? And then, of course, then building in this interactive component to the lesson where they, I asked them a question, when they might use this particular, or what phrase they might use in a particular situation, right? You forgot your milk, forgot to get a milk, asking them, would you mind getting me a milk? Thanks for getting my backpack. Oh, no problem. Right. When you need to leave, I gotta go. I do frown upon teaching our students grammatically correct things, but it is practical. Harry, it's nice to see you as opposed to nice to meet you. Be careful. Keep it down. And I think this is a thing too, where sometimes our language learners, maybe they're not exactly sure how to say something like this, right? How do we say it nicely? Make these requests and ask people, excuse me, to be quieter, right? But to do it in a nice way, how we might say that. I gotta go. Oh no, that's the bell for class, gotta go. Be careful, right?
Right.
Right. When they're in a store, right, they probably shop a lot, or they used to go into stores and shop. And if the sales clerk approaches them, what do they say? I'm just looking. Just excuse me. I think sometimes our language learners, and maybe it's a cultural thing and I've somehow missed it, but don't often, like if you run into somebody or you accidentally poke somebody, just apologize, excuse me, right? Mm-hmm. Another way, instead of saying shut up, be quiet, please be quiet. Thanks for your time. Watch out. So in this particular lesson in the book, it was just an assessment. It didn't have all of this. So I designed this as a way to make sure that the students understood how to use these different phrases. And just kind of to review them. Would you like to, do you have a minute? I'm not sure that they use that one, but we use that phrase a lot. Do you have a minute, right? And how to use that. Because they might need that with their boss, for example, or a friend that they want to talk to. This is always a fun one to teach, the you too, and how to do that correctly. Have a nice day, oh, you too, right? That's fun. I need to ask you a question. Do you have a minute? It's great talking to you. Oh, you too. Do you want the pupusa? No, thanks, right? So that was a lesson. And on the first day that I did this, I did the assessment and then I taught this lesson is what I did. Find out where I am. Close so I don't get confused. And then the next day, or the next session we had, I came back and I started with a Kahoot with expressions. So that's something kind of fun. And let me show my answers. So when they might use that, like in a situation. Thank you for my birthday present. Oh, you're welcome. Have a great day. You too. I forgot to get a napkin. Would you mind getting me one? My name is Jess. Nice to meet you. Would you like to go to the movies? No, I have other plans. I'm trying to study, right? Keep it down. I need to talk to someone. Do you have a minute? Can I help you find something? I'm just looking. Would you like more ice cream? Yeah, thanks. And the bicycle's coming really fast toward us. Watch out. Thanks for giving me my phone, no problem. I didn't mean to poke you with my elbow. Excuse me. So this was good. And with my students, on occasion, as we're doing this, they might make comments as we went along. But for the most part, again, noticing still not much speaking going on. Right? We're working on these phrases, but not much speaking. Then I did, the next thing that I did was, for my speaking activity, was to just choose 2 students and then to give them one of these expressions and have them ad-lib a short conversation. So that for me, that was a lot of fun. I enjoyed that a lot, listening to them, and they seemed to enjoy it too. And they really were quite brave and were willing to participate, which was nice. Then I did where they had to write short dialogues. And this, as you can imagine, depending on, I think it was reflective of their level of language too. So if they were pretty good speakers, and this was for an intermediate class that I'm teaching adults, the ones who were stronger did a better job with this particular activity, and the ones who were weaker didn't provide as much when I was asking them to do a short dialogue. And of course, number 4, giving them a choice. I find that giving them a choice sometimes doesn't always work very well. I kind of have to just tell them what I want. But and I'm going to show you a couple of examples of this too, that I found. And then maybe I'll do that next. And then here were a couple of examples of that. You can see a little bit better. So trying to use be careful. I'm not sure that no problem works here, right? The prompt was to use be careful. I thought this was an interesting, be careful. The boss doesn't like that we use cell phones when working. And then no problem. No problem. I just came to stuck in it. So trying to figure out how to use those phrases and to incorporate them in their writing as well as how they might be speaking. And then let me go back. And then I also gave a little quiz on that too. What expression is for an invitation? Which expression is for a greeting? For an apology? For refusing an offer? Right. For leave taking? A pre-request, right? Do you have a minute? Warning, directive. So that was my lessons for teaching these conventional expressions. But like I said, there wasn't a lot of speaking. It was a lot of perhaps reading and writing, but not too much on the speaking. So comments or questions with that lesson? Anybody? Would you like to add, ask, challenge me about? Yes, Maria?
No.
You're shaking your head.
No, at this moment, no question comes to mind, but thanks for asking.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. And when you insert those expressions, now, how do you get the students to make the difference between the level of formality of language? Because in a formal conversation with a boss in an office or in a public place, and then a conversation between friends, because how do you bring that into, that is, do you, for example, show them a model conversation, say in an informal situation, and then another one, for example, in a formal situation, they practice the written model, and then they practice with mates if they are face to face, or how do you go about that?
I don't know, but that's a great, I love that. That's great. I didn't approach that at all, but I'm just going to make a note right here about the register and the formal and the informal. That's wonderful. What would you recommend?
Well, generally, when you're teaching speaking, you first of all create the context. You try to let the students know what sort of situation you are in. If you were speaking with a friend or with somebody in an official situation, what's the level of language? You may not use these big terms, but if you say now, if you went to attend an interview and you were being asked questions, would you say the same sort of things that you would say to a friend if you are just by the roadside having a chat? Of course, if they understand, they will say no. And then you say, now, with a friend, these are the kind of expressions you can use. And in an interview, these are the kind of words you can use. For example, if you say, I gotta go. Now, when you teach that for a Native American, a Native British, a Native Dutch, and so on, in that language, they understand. Now, when do you use each? If you say gotta go, now do you first of all let the student know that it's I've got to go, that is the full form before you come to that informal and so on and so forth. Or you just teach that and then you let it for the students to discriminate. Or so what do you do?
Right. Oh,
since we are talking about explicit.
That's right. Yes, so I am doing that. Maybe on these particular like phrases, I might, if I noticed it was a more how to register to it, I did. And certainly when I talk about gotta and have to, I always tell them, right? I'm very explicit. I put it on the
Alright.
board. Here's what it is. Here's what we say. This is grammatically, does not exist. You cannot find this in a dictionary, like gotta. And I said, and you don't use it in your writing, right? So I am very explicit in that, right?
Okay.
That particular thing.
Alright.
And I think in other ways, sometimes when the students come in, and this is more with high school students, my adult students are very respectful, so that's never an issue. But you know, high school students might come in and try to be more casual with me, and I always call them on it immediately. I am not your friend in the hallway. This is not how you speak to me. I'm like your boss, right? But with the adults, they're, you know, I typically, that hasn't come up a lot with the adults, but that's a good point that I need to make sure that I teach them that as well, that particular like formal, informal thing. That's a good point. I don't, as I said, it hasn't been an issue with any of the adults that I've taught, but nonetheless, it should be something they're aware of. I agree. Thanks for that.
Welcome.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious. Go ahead.
No, I was going to call on you, Maria.
Oh, all right. I'm curious, Melissa. Do you give a survey to your students beforehand to ask them what situations, what what social situations or speaking situations they find most challenging or need help with, so that you can create lessons to help them communicate more effectively with with Americans or other people? For, is it a job situation? As William mentioned, maybe they need to talk to their boss and they're feeling uncomfortable. What would be the way? And they might give a specific problem, and then you could then, I guess what I'm asking is, do you take a survey of your students, like a needs assessment, to find out what exactly are the areas they're having where they would like help, and then you can guide them that way, whether it's a more formal situation like talking with their boss, or maybe a stranger that you don't know, you wouldn't be very casual with that person, or a classmate from another country or something.
Yeah, I haven't, but I just wrote it down because it's a wonderful idea. I love that. I did. One student this year told me that we were talking, and he said that it was more of a one-on-one situation where a student had said, my boss offered me this, but like to do some more training, and he had sort of not answered his boss. So I said, okay, so, and I explained to him that he should definitely, you know, go back and talk to his boss, and here's how he should ask him or approach the situation. I said, you know, you could just say, you know, I've been thinking about what you told me or what you asked me. And then, you know, you could then ask him these questions to get more information. So I did do it on a one-on-one level, but not as a whole group. And I think that's a wonderful idea. It's just right, maybe at the beginning of each year, the beginning of each semester or whatever, ask them, what situations do you find the most challenging when you're trying to, years ago, I had a friend who was working with her English, and she, you know, she's like, I hate going to fast food restaurants because they ask you these questions. It's so fast and I don't know what to say, right? She always hated that. But I think that's a wonderful idea, Maria. Thank you. I will definitely, I like that. Then definitely, right, then you can certainly focus your lessons to meet exactly those needs, right?
Yeah.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
So you guys, I'm just getting some great ideas. Thank you. All right. My next lesson was expressions of gratitude. And and in the text, in this book that I bought, it had more, this one actually had some lessons. So I adapted them more to being virtual, but these are the things when you might use these kind of expressions: complimenting, reassuring people, surprise, something, a lack of necessity, when somebody does something and they didn't have to do that for you. When someone does something for you, and then reciprocation. So again, as you can see, I did sort of the same thing again. And that was what I think after I did the second lesson, I was like, I don't know, it's just sort of the same thing. They're going to get bored, or maybe I was getting bored. I don't know which it is, right? Maybe it's, I was bored, maybe they weren't. I didn't ask them. I didn't query them about it. Maybe I should have. So what my slides looked like here. I'm using this pear deck because I like that. And then explaining the different times, right? I always think like signaling the end of a presentation. My students, I think sometimes they don't really know how to do that. They just sort of end, but they don't know like wrap it up somehow, right? So that's always something we maybe want to teach them. And so again, running through these phrases, right? Thanks for a great party. You're using that to compliment, or when you would use them, right? Here's the phrases you might use. And you know, these are things that we do without even thinking about it. But maybe our speakers learning, our language learners might not know. And I still think they probably do it in their first language. So it's not something that's unusual for them. Now this is interesting. One of my students said she had never heard the word G. So that was a new word. I think we still use G. I don't know. How to pronounce it and when do we use it? And then giving them a couple of scenarios. Okay, friendlies work early, take you to the doctor. Wow, what a life, you know, you're a lifesaver. I noticed in there, they had a little trouble with this idea or knowing how to use these phrases when I taught this lesson. Someone gives you something, thanks. This, of course, as we all, maybe we know or don't know, but this is a very much this like eating at somebody's house, or this becomes a very culturally loaded situation, right? And I explain to my students, just from my own experiences, that I feel like in other cultures, it's this thing where the hostess will ask you, would you like more food? And you say no, but really you mean yes. And the hostess asks you over and over, right? And then you say yes. Whereas, again, the United States is so changing. When I was growing up, or the hostess would ask you once, and if you said no, that was it. But today, what is traditional American culture anymore? I don't even know. But I also tell my students, realize that in the United States, for the most part, if a hostess or someone asks you if you want more and you say no, that's it. They're not going to ask you again because they asked you once and you said no, as opposed to maybe in your own culture where they will ask you more than once. So I did give them, try to alert them to this eating thing. That's a cultural.
And I, United States, we're very direct. So when we say no, we really mean no. And that's how an American would interpret it. So they would no longer ask because they don't want to come across as being pushy or insisting that you eat. What they're doing is simply obliging to your request of no more.
Mhm.
It is, I think that is something cultural. I know that in other countries, the refusal, and then you ask again and again, because let's say the person really is hungry, would like more, but doesn't want to seem like they're starving or something. And then finally they'll say yes, based on your example. Yeah, it is kind of tricky when it comes to food. And also I would tend to say, because I'm afraid I'd offend someone when I say no, I would say, no, thank you. The food is delicious, but I'm really full. So not to offend them, like I don't like it, but thank you for offering. But no, thanks. It was delicious. I'm just full now.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a hard one, I think. Yeah.
Yes.
Can I add
It's like,
something? This would be a good place where you could give the students, a dialogue that would happen when you're at your mother-in-law's house. And then how would you rewrite it if you were at the pizza parlor with your friend?
oh, good point.
Mhm.
I like that. I'm just going to jot that down. Yeah, but how many times have we eaten more when we didn't want to? If you're in another culture, right, and someone's up, you're like, yeah, I'm really full, no thanks. And they put more on your plate. That's happened many times to me. Request granted, if you're asking your teacher to give you an extension, right, as opposed to just like not asking. I'm not sure about other people's students, but I know my students, they don't ask for extra time and then they just don't do it. So I don't know if they don't know that they can ask and the teacher will allow it, or but certainly this would be a good thing to teach them as well, how to ask for more time on an assignment if it's possible. And I've often, and I explain, like, when I take a class, my teacher tells me, and if I want more time, I have to ask for that. And then saying goodbye with a thank you. And then I gave them some scenarios. What Jose might say, right? Thanks, we like it. It's close to the supermarket, for example, was my answer for that. Going to the store, someone's going to help you out, right? Thanks for helping me. But you might say in that situation, that would be wonderful. Hey, want to ride? Yes, that would be wonderful. And then just finding out a couple of things they might have learned, new things they would have learned from the lesson. And then same thing, I did a speaking activity again. This time, I tried it a little bit more formally, where I assigned a partner and then let them work with the different phrases, how they might make a little dialogue for that as well. And I love this, right? We say that'd be great. And this contraction, right? We don't even notice this contraction that we use. And I'm sure, like, so explaining what that means to language learners, it's a weird looking thing that we say. That'd be great. Yeah, that'd be great. That would be great. How we do that. Oh, hang on. All right. And again, I gave them a quiz again. And then here are a couple of the, I chose a few of these where they were writing them, which I thought, like, this one was interesting, and how they got to have a nice day. The cozier is really beautiful for you. You're good at your job. Thank you. Have a nice day. You too. They used a lot of the expressions, it looks like. I'm not well, I need a new job. Pretty good, $12 an hour. Thanks, that's just what I needed. An interesting way to use that phrase, I thought. And this, again, these are all sort of interesting, right? Sure, but make it fast, which I thought was cute. Because I don't have all the time in the world for you. This student who wrote this, he never talks in class. And then when he does something like this, I'm always like, oh my gosh, he has so much language, but he never uses it. He seems to really his use of language here is quite interesting, being that he never speaks in class. Maybe he would if we were face to face, but he just doesn't in the virtual. And I'm not really sure what how he means gee thanks. I could take that a couple of ways, actually. I think. And yeah, so those are my 2 lessons, and I'm just wondering if you have some more. I've gotten 3 great tips already. More ideas that you'd like to share?
I was wondering, Melissa, before you have the students write dialogues on their own with a partner, do you write dialogues together as a class? And so then let's say, so then you all can discuss how to use the phrase appropriately. For example, I don't have all the time in the world. And then the person says, gee, thanks. And then maybe you'd say, well, right there, we wouldn't quite use gee, thanks. Do you write dialogues first with your students so they can see you and them working together to write dialogues and the thinking that goes into writing a dialogue, and then after writing dialogues together, you've modeled for them, you and them wrote dialogues together, and then you let them out on their own to write dialogues?
Actually, in these 2 instances, I didn't. We did the speaking act where they spoke and did the dialogues that way. That was sort of my way to, okay, so if you can do it this way, now see if you can put it down on paper. But that might have been, right, a good way too. In some ways, I feel so like, I don't know, like teaching online like this, sometimes I feel like I don't have I'm not sure how much my students would even participate in this, like, let's write a dialogue together thing, right? They might, but they're a little standoffish. So I feel like I would just still be writing the dialogue myself. But I like that idea. So that was my way to get around that, was just to have them do the speaking dialogue. And like, now that you've done it this way, let's put it on paper, was sort of my way that I went about that. But I like that too. I think, right, writing those dialogues together. And then, like I said, I was so surprised when I read his. I was like, what, right? Because he never speaks. So I don't know how he's even using language, really.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Good idea. So I guess my question is, so the purpose of this workshop was to find out ways that I could do more speaking and integrate more speaking into this, where they're actually speaking more and I'm speaking less as well.
Do you, after they write the dialogues, do you allow them to perform their dialogues to the class, or in small groups? You can put them in different breakout rooms and they perform their dialogues. Maybe they memorize them and then they perform them for one another and for the class.
I mean, I have done things like that when we're face to face. I haven't tried it in a virtual situation, but I think it's definitely worth doing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
it's an idea.
Mm-hmm.
Can I add something? I think this might be hard to do online. It'd be easier when we're back in the classroom, but I've had students write dialogues with the added element of paper bag stories. So everybody gets a paper bag with like 5 objects in it, you know, a rubber band, a plastic spoon, whatever, whatever. And they have to include those as props in their dialogue, and it ends up being kind of crazy and fun.
Great. I love it. That sounds fun. Yeah, that would be hard to do in a, I mean, I guess you could do it. You could put it like on a slide that you gave them with pictures of those items or something. But that's I love it. That's a great idea. I just love that idea in general. It's fun.
The other piece of that I'll warn everybody about is sometimes it gets too raucous. And so in some classes, what I'll do is I'll say, you give, I would, instead of a dialogue, I would have them write a description because we were doing it with idioms. And then I would read it and they would act it out silently, because that was the way to kind of keep it from getting too crazy.
Mm-hmm. And do they have to use all 5 items in their dialogue?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
okay.
They could use them imaginatively in any way they want.
Okay. Wonderful. Oh, that's a great idea. Other suggestions or ideas? William, you've been quiet for a few minutes. Something you want to add? Anyone else? We've got lots of viewers who are quietly watching. William, something?
Well, sometimes you can play a recorded conversation as the model, as the example from which students will work. And if it's in a physical setting where the traditional setting where we have the students before the students, students before the teacher, that's in the classroom, you could use, like I said, an audio or a video recording, because there at least the setting, the situation can be, they can grasp it better. So if say in a shop, they will see the shop and then maybe they will see a customer asking questions to say an associate. So the context helps them to understand and understand the language used too. So
I like that. Yeah, sometimes I can get them to like, this, I don't know if this, I try to encourage this idea of more natural speaking. Like they might ask a person a question or a classmate a question, and they'll answer it, and then they don't like ask another question or continue it. They just sort of like, so I think that piece, yes, what a recorded situation might sound like. If you're going into the store, you're not just going to be like, I'm just looking. Or if you weren't just looking and maybe you were looking for something in particular, how you would go about asking for that, right? Because I do that sometimes too. If I'm in another country and I only know how to like, I'll just be like, no, thanks, or whatever. But if I really want something, then I've got to be able to be ready to figure out how I'm going to ask for that thing, right? As well. All right. Other suggestions? These are great. I've made some notes. I'm all excited about trying some new things.
Hi, I just wanted to say that this was really helpful, and I've been subbing classes with Washington English Center, teaching the adults online. And in the textbook, there usually is a section where there's a role play between 2 people, and they're talking about like any kind of like authentic situation they would encounter. And so I was thinking that like something like this, I would probably want to highlight more of like the different pragmatic language that they can use after after going through it, because the role play is really short. It's only like sometimes 4 lines. So something like including this kind of language instruction could really help them expand like the different contexts that they could use that for.
Yes. And one of my issues in teaching for Fairfax is that we don't the ESOL department of Fairfax County Public Schools, if anybody on the call is having to teach for them, we don't have a textbook. So if you're teaching English, like we call it English language development, every day I just go in and make it up as I go. So it would be nice to have a textbook. I have asked many times for one, but we don't have one. So the fact that you even have these little dialogues where you can even start is wonderful. So that's great. I would love that. Yeah, wonderful. All right. So the last thing I have is I'll put this in the chat box. Just 2 questions if you want to give me some other ideas, or if you've been shy and didn't want to say anything, or you've got some ideas on how to improve my lessons. And then if you wanted what I showed today, I can then make that available to you too. So let me copy that. And then, of course, the last slide is, I always forget this one. Thank you for attending and participating on this beautiful Saturday morning when you could be out gardening or riding a bike or taking a walk. So thanks for that. Let me quit sharing my screen. Here's that. Here's my form. If you would like to fill it out, you don't have to, but it'd be nice if you did. It just has, 2 questions on how I could improve, and then a place for you to, if you would like what I showed today, I'm happy to share that with you as well. But yeah, and that's really all I have. And I have to say, Nancy, I'm a big fan of yours. I would love to sit in your classes sometime and watch you teach. I've seen you, I think 2 or 3 places, and I'm always just so like excited when I'm like, oh, it's Nancy, because you have such great ideas.
You just said something about sharing a document and sharing a what you shared today. Is it in that?
Is it because it has like all those things that I have to like share with you. So if you want it, if you'll just put it in if you'll fill out that form or whatever, and then I can share it with you.
Where's the form?
Yeah.
Oh, I think it just went to one person. Sorry. I don't know how that happened. Let me try that again. I hate this is what I hate about Zoom or any of these when people like private message me. There we go. Thank you, Nancy. Now it's to everyone.
Thank you.
Now someone had private messaged me and I didn't realize it. Yeah.
All right. Okay, so
All right, thank you, Melissa, for this presentation, and thank you all for attending.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
thank you so much.
I appreciate everybody's input and help. And like I said, I'm very excited now about this. I feel re-energized.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay.
Ew.
Okay.
Thanks, William. Where do you
You're
teach,
welcome.
William?
Thanks. Thank you. It
Where
was
do you
great.
teach? Huh?
It was great. It was a wonderful lesson.
Oh, thank you. And where do you teach, William?
Well, I'm not teaching presently, but I taught for some 20 years before I came to this country, and I was teaching adults here until 2018. And so I want to get back to the classroom.
I imagine there's plenty of opportunities these days, right?
I hope I can find one. I've been looking, but the virus came and then upset everything. So when the situation improves, I hope I can find another teaching assignment.
Very good. Great. Well, I think you must be very good. I would enjoy your classes, I think.
Well, I hope I can deliver. I'm trying to work on my In fact, I learned British English, not speaking like an Englishman or like a Scots, but English in most parts of the world was introduced by the British, so that's the accent we have. So I'm trying to work on mine. I know at my age, I can't change to speak like an American, but then the key thing is helping others to learn the language, because in no situation can somebody, except if you were born in a place, you pick up the native accent of other people. Is really difficult. And so for me, it's a question of helping others to learn the language too, because no two people speak exactly the same way. So, but we have standards in pronunciation, writing, etc., etc. So to follow.
Yeah. But I would query to say, I would venture to say that when I had someone recently say to me, he works, I don't know, abroad or whatever. He said, you know, I want my children to speak American or whatever. And I looked at him, or sound American. And I said, and what exactly is that? Sounding American, right? I feel like today, there's so many people who live in America who have learned English as a second language that I don't know what that means. And depending on where you live in the country as well, right? People in the South say something different than the way somebody in the North says it. And the East Coast says it differently than the West Coast. So I'm not actually sure what sounding American is, right, Jesse? Like, I think we speak the language in the area that we live in, and we adapt those phrases. But I agree with you, William, that there are certain, like, of course, grammatical structures that we all use, but how we say things, and I don't know about that. All right, thanks, William.
You're welcome. Bye.
Bye.
I'm going to go ahead and end the meeting. So just a warning to everyone before I do that. And yeah, Melissa, thank you once again. And William, thank you for coming. It was great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jesse.
Yeah.
Have a good
Great to meet
day.
you.
Enjoy the beautiful weather.